It's October 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the war over in the Middle East. Israel says Hamas used North Korean and Iranian weapons in attacks on October 7th, while Iran says it's ready to play a mediating role in releasing Israeli hostages from Hamas under the condition that Israel frees 6,000 Palestinians held in its prisons. Over in Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and China's top diplomat Wang Yi acknowledged that the two countries have differences but share important common interests ahead of a potential face-to-face between U.S. President Joe Biden and Wang Yi. South Korea will begin gradually increasing the medical school enrollment quota in 2025 to tackle growing concerns over the shortage of doctors, especially in provincial areas, and to better prepare for Korea as it becomes a super-aged society. Israel says Hamas used weapons made by North Korea and Iran during its October 7th attack. Meanwhile, Tehran expressed willingness to get involved with hostage negotiations, but stressed that Palestinian prisoners in Israel should be released in exchange. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Israeli military says North Korean and Iranian weapons were used by Hamas during its attack on Israel on October 7th. Authorities on Thursday put weapons they say were used by Hamas during the attack, which included mines, rocket-propelled grenades, and drones. An Iranian mortar launcher and a North Korean-made grenade launcher were part of the haul of weapons recovered, with an official saying a total of 20% of all weapons used by Hamas during the attacks were from North Korea and Iran. Iran's foreign minister told the United Nations on Thursday that Tehran is ready to play a role in mediating talks to release Israeli hostages from Hamas, along with Qatar and Turkey. However, he said in order for such negotiations to take place, Israel must be prepared to release 6,000 Palestinians held in its prisons. Meanwhile, according to Russian media outlet TASS, a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow on Thursday for talks on the release of hostages, including Russian citizens that the militant group is currently holding in Gaza. The Kremlin said Iran's deputy foreign minister is in Moscow to hold talks with Russian officials to discuss the ongoing conflict and find ways to stabilize the situation. Israel slammed the visit by the Hamas delegation, saying that Russia should expel them from their country, while criticizing Russia for inviting them. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and China's top diplomat Wang Yi met in Washington on Thursday. According to CNN, Blinken welcomed Wang, saying he looks forward to constructive conversations over the next few days. Wang noted that the two countries have disagreements, but they share important common interests and challenges. While there was no mention of war between Israel and Hamas prior to the meeting, Blinken told the UN Security Council he would speak to Wang about cooperation on preventing the Israel-Hamas war from spilling over into a regional conflict. Wang will also meet with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and speak with President Joe Biden, possibly to discuss a potential meeting between Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC conference next month. The U.S. and China have recently held meetings between high-ranking officials to ease bilateral tensions. U.S. economic growth accelerated to nearly 5% in the third quarter. Now, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen expressed confidence in the economy's strength, countering concerns about rising deficits and an economic recession. Shin Se-byuk reports.
The U.S. economy grew 4.9% in the third quarter. The figure released by the Commerce Department on Thursday marked the highest increase in nearly 2 years since the 7% growth recorded in the fourth quarter of 2021. Notably, this surpassed both the previous quarter's 2.1% and economists' expectations of 4.3%, despite the country's interest rates reaching their highest level in 22 years. Consumer spending played a key role. It was up 4%, the fastest pace since the last quarter of 2021, demonstrating the country's resilience in the face of challenges such as high inflation and soaring interest rates. Other indicators, inventories, investment, and government spending also posted strong growth. In a TV interview on Thursday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen acknowledged that while the growth rate is likely to slow, she labeled it as a good, strong number. Yellen also expressed confidence in the U.S. economy's ability to achieve a soft landing. Meanwhile, as for the significant increase in long-term bond yields, Yellen attributed this to confidence in the U.S. economy, which has led to expectations of higher interest rates for a longer period. The interest rate on the 10-year U.S. Treasury bond hit 5% early this week, the highest since 2007. This came as the U.S. last week reported a $1.7 trillion federal budget deficit for the fiscal year 2023. The 10-year Treasury yield, a barometer of investor confidence, is widely considered one of the safest investments as it carries the full backing of the U.S. government. There have been suggestions that higher bond yields came as a result of worries about rising U.S. deficits and an economic recession. Despite concerns, Yellen dismissed suggestions of rising U.S. deficits and a potential economic recession and emphasized the possibility of longer-term yields decreasing. 신세벽, Arirang News.
It's been almost 3 weeks since the Hamas attack on Israel sparked concern over rising economic uncertainty, especially in terms of volatility in energy prices and rising inflationary pressure. What scenarios could drive the economic impact of the conflict in the Middle East? Our Chinas Wang explains.
Since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas conflict, all eyes have been on global oil prices, which can push up inflation both at home and abroad. Global oil prices jumped more than 4% on the third day of the Israel-Hamas conflict, which was the biggest one-day gain since April 3rd. However, even though oil prices rebounded as of Wednesday after prices fell on Tuesday for the third straight session, fluctuations have been less significant for the past few days. This came amid diplomatic efforts from a number of countries to release hostages. Also, Israel has not yet launched a ground invasion due to international pressure, alleviating concerns about disruptions in oil supply. But it's too early to predict the actual economic impact, as it's uncertain how the conflict will unfold. Bloomberg Economics estimates that if the conflict extends to a war between Israel and Iran, it could push oil prices to $150 a barrel and drop global growth to 1.7%. This is because of Iran's proximity to the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil trading route.
If Iran disrupts oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz or even blocks the strait, it could significantly impact global oil prices. This is because about 30% of the volume of the world's total oil consumption passes through that route.
Meanwhile, unlike the Ukraine war, in the case of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the region's contribution to global raw material production is not substantial. According to a report from the Korea International Trade Association, Israel and Palestine each account for less than 0.4% of South Korea's overall trade, meaning the effect is expected to be insignificant. However, the author of the report said it's necessary to diversify the supply chain of certain items.
South Korea heavily depends on Israel for key items including bromine and airborne radar for aircraft. With an import dependency exceeding 90% for these items, a prolonged Israel-Hamas conflict could pose challenges for South Korea. Therefore, it is crucial to diversify the supply chain to secure alternative suppliers.
He added that a prolonged war could potentially disrupt the supply chains in these advanced industries, as Israel is a hub for this sector, where there are R&D centers and sales offices of South Korean firms like Samsung and SK hynix. 신나영, 아리랑 뉴스.
It's almost been a year since South Korea's Itaewon tragedy, which resulted in a huge decrease in foot traffic and put a significant burden on local businesses. Have things returned to what they used to be? Let's turn to Professor Bae So-young this morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Professor, it's been a year, like I said, since the tragic incident took place in Central Tower. Now, what has the past year been like, especially for business in that area?
Well, it's been an extremely challenging year for all the businesses in Itaewon for the past year. So there's been a significant drop in customers and tourists in the areas, resulting in reduced revenue for local businesses. So some shops had to temporarily shut down, and also others have also faced financial hardships due to the decreased food traffic. So especially such challenges severely impacted like local bars and pubs. So while there used to be lots of Korean customers before, but now there are much more foreigners compared to Korean citizens. So it seems like Korean people still feel hesitant to visit those Itaewon area due to their emotional reluctance.
Right, it was definitely a hub for both locals and foreigners. Then what's it like now? Because I remember the area, even the surrounding area, being completely emptied out. How are things now then?
Yeah, so after the incident, the entire area was literally like emptied out for a while. But since then, the government and businesses and some artist groups, sometimes like non-government organizations, and some of the citizens have been really working so hard to recreate some energy and vibrance in the Itaewon and gain its reputation back. So in a wish to attract more people to revisit this area, many like cultural events, performances, or like exhibitions were organized as well. So now, especially during the weekend season, so it seems like many people get together in this Itaewon area again, just like before. And there are even long lines in front of the popular restaurants. But the thing is, like during the weekdays, the number of visitors is quite limited. So it's still at about like 60% compared to the previous year. And the general atmosphere is not quite the same as before. Some business owners, they feel really hopeless and say that this seems to be actually their new normal, which they really need to get used to. So many shops still rely on substantial amount of loans to survive throughout this challenging period of recovery.
Sure, the liveliness in the area is not as lively, but slowly recovering, it sounds like. Now, such tragedies are not unique to South Korea, I have to say. Things like this have happened around the world, and communities and business have managed to survive and get back on their feet, right? Could you provide any examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So tragic incidents have occurred in many parts of the world society. And one of the examples was actually terrorist attack in the French city of Nice back in 2016. So after the attack, the number of visitors actually sharply dropped after the event, and all the businesses were like so much devastated. But the government put all the effort to ensure the security measures and initiated cultural and tourism events to rebuild their city and reposition themselves. So now Nice has become a popular tourist destination once again. And another example would be like back in 2019 and 20, there was a big bushfire in Australia. It was a natural disaster. And while valuable like cultural heritage and natural areas were like all burnt due to this fire, so it inspired Australians to launch their own initiative, their own community-driven campaigns to encourage people to go back to those impacted area. And they got to pay even more attention to like wildlife conservation and local protection again too. So depending on the nature and the scale of the accident, the recovery period may differ, but in most of the cases, impact has been eased, like in terms of the number of tourists or visitors within like 2 to 3 years after the incident, like based on the strong like resilience of the whole community.
Sure, Professor, but you've mentioned how there were events organized by non-government organizations. And what is it that those businesses in Itaewon need the most to fully return to where they were before? Is it that type of activities or events? What is it?
Well, I think the two primary supports will be needed. So first, absolutely like financial support. So just like when the pandemic occurred, like business owners, they would feel really frustrated since the whole situation seemed to be so unsure. So to keep their businesses, they would need like short-term and long-term financial support. And second of all, it is important to drive kind of a campaign to reposition this area to drive more visitors back. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this incident should be completely forgotten. So in history, like all events that have occurred become a part of the identity of that region, and also it holds significant messages. So while keeping this kind of lessons learned from this incident, the region would need to be promoted in a very creative way with the whole community.
That's great. So financial aid and also keeping the identity that the place has held. All right, Professor Bae, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
South Korea will start to gradually increase the medical school admissions quota in 2025 in order to tackle doctor shortages in areas outside the capital, as well as in essential areas of medicine. Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong said Thursday that the government will push ahead with its planned increase, starting with schools that can physically handle more students. Now, schools that can't will follow the measure from 2026. The government aims to increase the quotas for existing medical schools while reviewing the plan to open new schools in areas outside of Seoul. The quota has been frozen at a little over 3,000 since 2006. Amid a rising criticism from doctors, the government will continue talks to improve working conditions, and it will also inject some $220 million each year to increase compensation for obstetrics and pediatrics. Authorities here in South Korea are tightening the vaccination campaign for cattle with lumpy skin disease spreading through the cattle across the country. Our Ian-hee went to one of local farms to check out on-site disease prevention efforts.
Viral lumpy skin disease is spreading in South Korea with the number of farms found to have confirmed cases on the rise. The outbreak was first discovered in Chungcheongnam-do province on October 20th. And since then, more at other farms in the province, as well as in neighboring Chungcheongbuk-do province, Gyeonggi-do, Jeollabuk-do, and Gangwon-do provinces, and Incheon. This has led to the culling of over 2,000 cattle. As part of the response, authorities have announced the introduction of an additional 4 million doses of the vaccine by the end of this month, and that all cattle in the country will be vaccinated by early November. The Central Disaster Management Headquarters is currently carrying out vaccinations, focusing on farms close to where outbreaks occurred, using the 540,000 doses of pre-secured vaccine. This farm in Gyeonggi-do province is vaccinating all 104 cattle in its herd.
The vaccination of all cattle on the farm has been completed according to the government's manual, and we are keeping strict vehicle control measures to prevent the spread of the disease. Also, I'm trying my best to control parasites, since the virus is transmitted by blood-sucking insects. When feeding the animals in the morning and evening, I am spending more time observing the cattle to check for symptoms.
Local governments are actively promoting disease preventive measures, including the operation of disinfection facilities, as well as pest control measures, as lumpy skin disease is transmitted by blood-feeding insects. The mortality rate is under 10%, and symptoms include skin nodules and lower milk production. While the disease does not pose a threat to humans in any way, farm owners are concerned.
I believe that it is most important for individual farm owners to pay careful attention to prevent the disease from spreading. I am seriously concerned about the lumpy skin disease spreading to my farm and leading to a culling of all the cattle.
The Central Disaster Management Headquarters has placed restrictions on the movement of cattle on farms in regions neighboring areas where lumpy skin disease has been found until vaccination is complete. Authorities say, considering the period required for antibodies to form, the next 3 weeks are crucial. Ian-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's men's national football team has moved up 2 spots in the latest FIFA rankings to 24th in the world. That's according to the latest FIFA ranking released on Thursday. It's South Korea's second consecutive jump after the team also jumped 2 places in July. The latest ranking comes as Taeguk Warriors beat Tunisia 4-0 and Vietnam 6-0 this month. Since Jurgen Klinsmann took over the national team in March, South Korea has had 3 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. And among Asian countries, Japan ranked highest in 18th position.
Good morning, I'm Siyoung Kim, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. Following the mass shooting in the city of Lewiston, Maine on Wednesday, which left at least 18 dead, American President Joe Biden released a statement urging lawmakers, especially Republican counterparts, to cooperate in passing bills for strengthening gun laws. While an intensive manhunt is still underway for the 40-year-old suspect, Robert Card, Biden released a White House statement on Thursday emphasizing the urgent need for additional legislative action. Biden has been promoting gun safety policies through the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, as well as the establishment of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. The president said that this is the very least we owe every American who will now bear the scars, physical and mental, of this latest attack. Category 5 Hurricane Otis, which made landfall on Mexico's Pacific coast on Wednesday, has reportedly caused at least 27 deaths and left 4 people missing. The tourist city of Acapulco was particularly affected by the hurricane, which rapidly strengthened from a tropical storm to a powerful Category 5 hurricane in record time. The storm left Acapulco's municipal water system down and some 500,000 homes without power. Authorities have also raised concerns over a potential increase in the number of dead following extensive devastation. Mexico's President López Obrador visited Acapulco late Wednesday and said that restoring power and infrastructure was a top priority. Scientists are working towards an explanation as to why the hurricane was not foreseen. Moving over to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, now where the two of the world's best in heavyweight boxing and mixed martial arts, Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, are set to face off under boxing rules on Saturday night. Tyson Fury, nicknamed the Gypsy King, is a 35-year-old WBC heavyweight champion born in Manchester, UK. His opponent, Francis the Predator Ngannou, a 37-year-old former UFC heavyweight champion, has come a long way from working in a sand quarry in Cameroon as a 12-year-old to becoming one of the most renowned figures in mixed martial arts. In what's being called a dream matchup between boxing and UFC, the fighters are expected to touch gloves after a series of undercut bouts beginning 8 p.m. local time. More than 50 years after the British rock band from Liverpool, the Beatles, broke up, the band announced the release of what's being called their last song, titled Now and Then. Among the most iconic pop stars in the history of music, the Fab Four debuted in 1960 and released timeless global hits such as Hey Jude, Come Together and Let It Be before the band broke up in 1970. Comprised of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, the band's only 2 surviving members, 81-year-old McCartney and 83-year-old Starr, worked with director Peter Jackson, who used AI to complete the recording. Now and Then will be released on Thursday, November 2nd.
Good morning. The skies look like it's going to rain soon in the capital, but I hope you didn't take your umbrella. The skies will get sunnier, but those in the east of Gangwon-do province are in for a drenching. Keep an umbrella handy through this afternoon. Expect to see up to 60 millimeters for those in the east of Gangwon-do. The rest of the country could see 5 to 40 millimeters along with thunder and lightning during the day today. Unlike what was expected, temperatures are much warmer than normal this morning in most places. And afternoon highs will be a couple of notches lower than yesterday, but still higher than seasonal temperatures this afternoon. Seoul and Gwangju will see highs of 19 degrees, Busan at 22 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Air quality has improved in central regions, but Gyeongsang-do provinces and surrounding areas are slightly higher than usual. Looking ahead to the weekend, ample sunshine is forecasted, painting a perfect backdrop for autumn outings. But make sure to layer up and be prepared for fluctuating conditions. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for a Monday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.